they don't do the insurance correctly. Okay.
I've never heard of it actually being called.
I
So
haven't either.
I would love to actually hear somebody say, "Oh yeah, that's happened to me," but to date,
no,
nobody I've ever talked to has ever.
I don't think there's any. I don't know of anything.
It's
but
like the idea the IRS has a deadline after foreclosure to redeem the property,
Exactly.
but they don't.
Never heard of it happening.
No. So
you know what? It's like, yeah, I'm in a 1,000-year flood zone, and I guess
Yeah.
in theory it could flood, but it hasn't ever flooded, and it
So the other
could.
question that came up from John was that, does the power of attorney be in the state of him or the state of the borrower where the property is located?
That's going to be I wouldn't even attempt to answer that, because there's like, our attorneys will create all that documentation relative to that type of transaction. So if you're trying to acquire something with a sub 2, and you want to close on it, then there's a whole set of documents specific for that type of acquisition that we just utilize, that's been created by, legal counsel that has you do it. I would never go and try to do any of that on my own, and I wouldn't trust so do it. And every state's different.
Yeah.
Every state's different. You got judicial, you got non-judicial, you got different state laws, you got usury lists, there's all kinds of things that could impact that.
So in my experience, I'm up in Canada. So every once in a while I have it where I'm selling property, and what I've run into is that they require a US notary to notarize the signature, which is a pain in the butt, because now I live further away from the border than I used to. I used to just drive down. Now I'm a couple hours away, so it's not worth it. So what I do is I just issue a power of attorney for my realtor to go ahead and sign on my behalf. And so I issue it from Canada. They record it in the state where that property is.
I'm going to guess
I don't know if that helps, but
I'm going to guess that it's where the property is located, because
that's my guess as well.
And you're getting a power of attorney from the borrower to act on their behalf.
Yeah, that's my guess.
I mean, at the end of the day, for me,
Yeah.
and I've done this literally thousands of times, okay, and I've been doing it a long time. And one thing I'm not going to do is I'm not going to underwrite my buyers. I'm going to let somebody like Max do it.
Yep.
I'm not going to service my notes. I'm going to let somebody like FCI or Madison or NAMS or August REI do it. Okay. I'm not going to create my own promissory notes to save a few bucks. I'm going to let my attorney do it. And I'm just going to do it that way. And I'm going to build the deal. I'm going to make the deal work under those constraints, or I'm not going to do it.
I do that. I'm the stupidest man in the room. You guys do all the professional work. I'll run numbers.
There's no reason to make it any more difficult than that. It just isn't,
Let's switch gears here, right? Yeah. We created this note. We have our power of attorney for wraps, and we have our idea. We're going to use a servicer because it makes sense, right? So we're going to talk about how to sell this note for the top dollar. What are the things that the originator, who may be originating notes now, doing that may be incorrect, right? And or can add on to a note to make it worth the most amount of money to be able to sell it tomorrow and not be surprised when they get a quote from us and going, holy goodness.
Maybe let's start with just terms. What kind of terms would be?
Right.
Well, that's a great question. I think the terms is probably, the terms of the deal is probably one of the biggest things, because look, you guys are note buyers. Let's look at it from the note buyer's perspective and working backwards. What's probably the number one thing that you're looking for relative to buying a note?
Property, right?
The property itself.
Property.
And my return.
Look at the asset. That's number one.
I have the collateral file.
Yeah.
Right. I have the numbers. Right.
Yep.
Yeah. So what's my return?
Yeah. What's your return? Right. Yeah. So your yield. Right. So if you are if let's just say you're trying to get a 10% yield. Okay. Well, and you're trying to buy a note from somebody. I don't care how good the collateral file is. I don't care if the borrower's got an 800 credit score and it's at a 50% LTV and a 40% ITV. You're not taking a 3% yield. Am I correct?
That's correct.
Never on a million years.
So let's talk about things that we don't care about as note buyers. We talked about the last webinar in December. I don't care the borrower is a local handyman. Don't care. I don't care that when the borrower defaulted, what happened? I don't care. right?
I don't.
don't care how you found the deal. I don't care what kind of fridge you rehab the property with,
Yeah.
right? There's numbers that go into our world, right? And the note encompasses the 5 big numbers, right? We have our balance of our loan, we have our interest rate, we have our term, we have our P&I, and a balloon if there's anything, right? And how you stagger that. If you have a balloon in 2 months or 24 months or whatever, it's a mathematical equation to equal out my yield or IRR number. So when we say terms, that's what we're talking about, those big 5 numbers.
Yeah. And
So
those are paramount.
interest rates
above
obviously super important when you write the note, because what
Yeah.
we're seeing, you're seeing this now.
Yeah.
Okay. I would never write an interest rate that low, right?
Nope,
And here's
yeah.
the reason, because rates were historically low a couple years ago, 3.5%. So a lot of seller financing guys go, well, you know what? The bank's at 3. I'll be smarter than the bank. I'll write it at 4.
Yeah.
Well, what is that getting you now? 50 cents on the dollar if you're lucky?
Yeah.
Maybe not even, right? Maybe 30%, 30 cents on the dollar. So that's one. I mean, I think that's probably the biggest.
Yes.
I mean, obviously the borrower file is important,
yes.
but I think and I think the other challenge that a lot of people don't really take into consideration, there's a big difference between what you sell it for and what the value of the property is.
Yes.
Okay.
Oh yeah.
And a lot of times that we see people, because they are offering seller financing, they want to sell it at a premium. Okay. So the house is worth 200,000. So they want to sell it for 220. Okay. Now, I have no issue selling it for 220 if it's worth 200. It's
Right.
if that's what the agreement is. But you got to understand that when the note buyer is going to go look at that asset to buy, they're going to base it on the $200,000 because that's their risk level, right? So you have to be able to adjust it accordingly to your point and figure out what that discount potentially is going to look like. Now, if you're going to stay in the deal and you can get it, cool. You know, here's another thing you can do. What's that? I'm sorry.
We compare similar to rentals, right?
Yeah.
Passively, a rental that's fully paying, right? The tenant's doing great. If you sold a tenant occupied property, paying occupied, most people pay based on the cash flow. We're doing the exact same idea.
Same thing.
We have a promissory note that we're going to get cash flow in, and we're basing it based on return. We may be getting private capital, we may not, but we want to guarantee an annual return for our dollars. And that's what we care about, the numbers. If it's performing or non-performing. Now, if you have a non-performing asset, that's where me and Nathan kind of grew up on, which is non-performing assets, because we are buying it so well priced and we can do all the foreclosure work. So if anyone out there has a owner finance note that's non-performing or in performing, I'll drop in a link in the chat or reach out to one of us afterwards through our the link I put in before, where you can ask us, hey, I have an asset that I'm looking to sell. What would you bid it at? But we're going over one of the key items to make that higher value. If you send me a loan that's written at 5%, good luck. Good luck.
Yeah. The other thing
I'm
I think
still willing to buy it, but the discount's going to be big, and you may
Yeah.
not like that.
well, and
So-
the discount might be so big it becomes a loss, not a deal for the seller of the note, right? And I think the other big part of this thing, at least it is for me, I don't know, because of all the notes that we've created, who the note buyers have been, is the underwriting of the buyer, right? And I don't mean it necessarily from, you know, the fact that they got a 700 credit score versus a 600 credit score. I'm talking about all the documentation, the stuff that Max is here. Maybe we let Max talk about how critical the RMLO underwriting process is, because for me, you know, when it's done correctly, there might be 35 disclosures in this package. Okay. You got the Patriot Act. I mean, Max can probably talk about these disclosures. Are they important to me? Not really, but they must be important to somebody. Otherwise, they wouldn't have you doing them, right? If you go to Bank of America and you go apply for a loan for a mortgage, guess what you're going to have? You're going to sign probably 60 different times on that loan package. Why is that? Okay. It's disclosure. Right. And, you know, so we have to be able to take that into consideration. It gives people that are looking at a snapshot and taking a picture of the note and looking into what degree of probability will this loan perform, right? That's one of the things that we're looking at. And as a result of that, when you see a file that's stacked with 600 pages and has 72 signatures on the from the borrower, and you see another file that's written on a napkin, and they say that the borrower pays them every first of the month in $100 bills, okay? Which, you know what I'm saying? That's what we're trying to establish the risk, because risk is a really important part of this equation, and this is probably the one thing that you probably can't put a dollar value on, right? When you can't, it's hard to monetize or how to
Before we
assess
let
the
Max
value.
jump in here too.
Yeah,
really
let's
gotta
talk about
keep that-
RMLO.
Yeah, so Max is a call underwriter. He's off camera. He said he has a face for radio, so we'll let him stay off camera. One of the things is you mentioned before states. Now, if you have a property in Texas, that's different than having a property in Illinois, New Jersey, South Carolina. Why is that? If it defaults, it goes through a legal process called foreclosure, which allows me to get a property back because it's secured by the note.